Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Today, inshallah, we start a new station, and that is a station of i'tisaam. And the word i'tisaam comes from the word asama, or asima, asama, which means to prevent or to protect. So someone who is ma'soom is someone who is protected from mistake. An asim is someone who protects someone else. So Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam, the Quran tells his child who thought he could seek refuge in a mountain against the flood, or to save him from the flood. Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam says, if I can remember the verse, قال لا عاصم اليوم من أمر الله إلا من رحم. There is no one to protect from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the command of Allah, except who Allah has mercy on. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in another verse says about the people of hellfire, مَا لَهُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ عَاصِمٍ. They have no one besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect them. So that's the word asama. So i'tisaam is on the way ifti'al. And what that means is to put an effort, to put a lot of effort in actually reaching this level of i'tisaam. Right? So you are doing something to obtain protection, to obtain this prevention, being prevented from doing something wrong, as well as being harmed by something else. So huwa at-tamassuk bima ya'simuk. It is about holding on to what protects you. Here, obviously, being Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Quran has two types. You know what? Can you pause this? The battery, I forgot the battery. Okay, so there are two types of i'tisaam that are mentioned in the Quran. They go back to two verses. The first one is al-i'tisaam bihablillah, and the second is al-i'tisaam billah. Doing i'tisaam, seeking protection by grabbing onto the rope of Allah, and the second one is seeking protection by grabbing onto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. So let's talk about each very briefly. Al-i'tisaam bihablillah, grabbing hold to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is in Surah Ali Imran. And the definition of this, or how do we understand this, the scholars differed, but it all goes back to really one idea. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma says that doing i'tisaam to the rope of Allah means the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Islam. And Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh said the jama'ah, the group of Muslims. And this term jama'ah sometimes is misunderstood and sometimes maybe even exaggerated. But what the concept of jama'ah means is that the mainstream opinion of believers, or the opinion of believers that goes back to the most authentic understanding of Islam, right? That is the jama'ah. It is not about a number of people, right? It's not about the majority of Muslims. Sometimes people misunderstand that, and they think it's the jama'ah is the majority of Muslims. Not necessarily, right? Just because there's a majority who follow a particular opinion does not make it automatically the correct opinion. Also, theoretically speaking, it is possible, although unlikely, it is possible that the majority of Muslims follow an orthodox understanding of Islam. It is possible, right? Although unlikely, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised to protect this ummah. So the jama'ah is really the group of Muslims who are on the truth. There will always be a group of Muslims who are on the truth. So it's about grabbing onto that jama'ah, not following these new shuyukh, or the pseudo-sheikhs as they call them, who come with very strange ideas, right? Like this is becoming more common, unfortunately, that a new understanding for a verse has come out after 1400 years. Well, what is that saying? It's saying that all the companions misunderstood the verse, and for 1400 years of scholarship, no one has come to the correct conclusion, and that's absolutely silly, right? Especially when this new interpretation is very contradictory to the previous or the standard interpretation. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ just leave the believers, his companions, to misunderstand the verse. Right? That's problematic. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that He will protect, He will preserve this Qur'an. And the preservation of the Qur'an part of the preservation of the Qur'an is preserving the meanings. Right? So therefore, we say it is impossible. It is absolutely impossible that there is a period of time in our history where all Muslims completely misunderstood a verse of the Qur'an. Right? Or actually be more specific, that all the scholars misunderstood a verse in the Qur'an, or a concept in the Qur'an, or a fiqh ruling, whatever. There's always the true opinion present, right? It might be between many other opinions, but the truth is always there. It's always accessible, right? And that is the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to preserve the Qur'an. So Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh says that, grab hold to this group who are on the truth, because it is the rope of Allah which He commanded us to hold on to. And He said something very interesting, and I think it's very wise to contemplate this, or it's a wise statement, especially for our times. It's very relevant to our times. He says, مَا تَكْرَهُونَ فِي الْجَمَاعَةِ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَهُ فِي الْفُرْقَةِ. What you dislike from that group is better than what you like by yourself. In other words, he's saying it is better to be part of a group that's doing good work, authentic work, right? They're actually working for Islam, but you might have certain criticism against them. Right? It's better to work with that group than to be by yourself doing what you think is better, right? And anyone who knows anything about politics will understand why, right? It's either you are strong in a group or you're weak by yourself. That's just the bottom line. That's how it is. So Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh gave us that wise advice. And he also has an opinion that the habl of Allah, the rope of Allah, is the Qur'an. Well, all three of these statements go back to the idea that it's going back to the religion of Islam. Because the Qur'an goes back to the religion. The Jama'ah are holding on to the Qur'an. That's what makes them the Jama'ah. And the Qur'an itself, or the opinion of Ibn Mas'ud, says the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, by grabbing hold to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a role that differs from the other type of i'tisam that we'll get to in a moment. The role of this i'tisam, protecting ourselves by grabbing onto the rope of Allah, its role is to protect us from misguidance, right? So put an image in your mind. Imagine the straight path, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, it said that one time he drew a line in the sand. He took a branch and drew a line, and out of that line came all these other paths, right? He said, this straight line is Islam. This is the straight path. And these other paths are misguidance. At the door of each path, what's it called? At the door of each of these other paths, right, that are going outside of Islam, is a shaitan calling to it. There's someone calling to it. So don't be stunned or confused to all of these new people, or that there's always someone or a group of people calling to misguidance in Islam in our times, right? There's always these people from the time of the companions, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ until now. So never feel, that, oh my God, what's going on, or the sky is falling. It's always been like that. And Islam has always pushed them back, right? In one way or another. So grabbing hold to the rope of Allah, it helps us stay on that straight path. Okay? Does that make sense? So if you can imagine that straight path, this type of i'tisam is about sticking to that straight path, not deviating from it. Right? The second type of i'tisam, and i'tisam billah, seeking protection by grabbing on or grabbing hold to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, comes from the verse, وَمَن يَعْتَصِم بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ هُدِيَ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Whoever holds on to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they are guided to the straight path. And that's also in Surah Ali Imran. Now the role of this i'tisam, right, is to help us stay consistent on this path. So the first one is kind of like a fence. You're propping up a fence on this path so that you can't go outside of it. This type of i'tisam is about having the strength to continue to walk the path. So someone can prop up these fences, but they're sitting down, right? They're not really going anywhere. No, this one is about continuing our path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by building our tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by building our motivation, our discipline, by protecting us from becoming burnt out. So it's re-energizing us and continuing to energize us so that we continue to walk on this path. So the first one, again, just to summarize, the first i'tisam helps guide the person to the straight path, right? This is the straight path. It's defining it for you. So if you have a decision to make, you're at a store, right? And there's something you want to buy, but you know what? Your heart is agitating you. I feel like this is strange, right? It feels haram. It doesn't feel right. What should I do? I'tisam bihablillah, grabbing hold to the rope of Allah, is about the tools that Islam gives you to help determine whether or not this is a good decision or not. Right? So when you look at the product, okay, what is it? Let's say it's a piece of a food item, right? And you're reading the ingredients. There's something there that you don't recognize. But you know what? You remember when you studied once, that is a term that's used to refer to some sort of pig meat, whatever, right? And you're sitting, but you don't know. You're not certain. You're not for sure. What do you do now, right? Well, Islam teaches us how to make the decision. And just to be very brief here, I'm kind of confining the discussion in our mind. The Prophet ﷺ says, "إن الحلال بين وإن الحرام بين وبينهما أمور مشتبهات لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس فمن اتقى الشبهات فقد استبرأ لدينه وعرضه." The Prophet ﷺ says the halal is clear. There are certain things that are clearly halal. Buying a piece of glass or a cup, halal, right? Buying some toy for your child, halal. It's clear. There are certain things that are haram. Alcohol is haram. Interest is haram. Whatever it is. These are clearly haram things. And between them is a gray area, right? There is no particular nas or text in the Quran or Hadith that says that this is haram or this is halal, right? And there is some reason to doubt its validity or its halalness, its permissibility. So here the Prophet ﷺ says that if you're in that gray area and you don't know how to determine whether or not this is halal in the halal section or the haram section, then the Prophet ﷺ says whoever stays away from this gray area, then they preserve their faith and they preserve their reputation, right? So again, I'm giving you one example, and that is if you feel like, this doesn't seem right, and you don't know how to distinguish whether or not it's halal or haram, then the decision to make is to stay away from it until you're able to determine, until you're able to ask someone who does know. So that is an example of grabbing onto the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rope of Allah. Why? Because now you are grabbing onto something that's protecting you. So notice the words of the Prophet ﷺ. Whoever stays away from this, they preserve, they protect their faith. فَقَدْ اسْتَبْرَأَ لِدِينِهِ. They keep themselves free of any blame in terms of religion, and they keep their reputation clean. Because sometimes what happens is, is a funny example, right? There were two young guys debating whether or not In-N-Out Burger is halal, right? So one kid is like, no, it's not halal, it's haram, their meat isn't halal. And another kid is, no, it is halal. And I'm 100% sure it's halal, right? Why? He said, I saw the sheikh eating In-N-Out, all right? So, the kid is trying to reconcile, but what happens is when sometimes, a lot of times, when someone does something haram, you don't know who's watching. Sometimes you're just randomly passing by and you see someone you know, right? And they might be doing something wrong. Well, that immediately, tarnishes their reputation. So a person always has to be careful. Now, of course, when we abstain from something, it's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is concerned with our reputation as well. He is concerned with our well-being, and much of our well-being has to do with our social well-being as well, right? So I'm not saying that we do this out of concern of what people are going to think of us, but if we are not certain what we're doing is halal or what we're doing is haram or this is the truth, then it's better that we preserve our reputation than benefiting ourselves with some worldly gain, right? So the first i'tisam, the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is about guiding the believer to the straight path. Whereas the second one, doing i'tisam with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is what's preserving their mission or their pursuit of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Abu Ismail al-Harawi goes into more detail here and how we can better do i'tisam. He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, al-i'tisamu bihablillah huwa al-muhafadatu ala ta'atihi muraqiban li-amrih. He says that doing i'tisam with the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is about preserving your obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protecting your obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of muraqabah, out of, he uses this term, the really adhering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command. And he explains this in the following way. I think this is very important. Some people fall into this without realizing that they fell into it. And that is the reason why they are obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is out of love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not out of customs. Now, alhamdulillah, and I say alhamdulillah because this is a very big blessing. We in America, right, we don't have this concern of doing something out of custom because we are in America. You can do whatever you want, right? So long as it's not illegal, no one's going to ask you why you're doing this. Contrary to Muslim majority countries, right? There are certain countries where, out of customs, women wear hijab, right? And there are many examples, all too many examples. They're in a Middle Eastern country, a Muslim country, they're wearing hijab. As soon as they leave it, they take it off. What is that a sign of? They were doing that, they were wearing the hijab out of customs, not out of love and obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So alhamdulillah, this is a great blessing that we don't really have this challenge. When a woman goes outside in hijab, she's doing it for the sake of Allah, she's not doing it for the sake of anything else, right? Because it's not a fad. No one's going to criticize you for, not wearing the hijab here in our society. The same thing for the youth, not dating. They don't have to be worried, oh my God, if I date, my dad is, or the society is going to see me and it's going to be a lot of problems, right? You go date, you're doing the cool thing now. You're no longer a weirdo. So Abu Ismail here is saying that grabbing onto the rope of Allah, what is fundamental to this or critical to this is that they're obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of love of Allah and out of obedience to Him and out of self-accountability. I'm holding myself accountable and I know on the Day of Judgment Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask me about this, therefore I better do well in this life. I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask me about my prayer, so I better pray. I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask me about my character, right? And although society is calling to certain behaviors, right, a lot of it is ridiculous. No, I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask me about my behaviors, therefore I'm going to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is what he means. This is i'tisam billah. This is the foundation of doing i'tisam bihablillah, and an example of this in our Sharia is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, "Man sama Ramadana imanan wa ihtisaban, ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min dhanbih." Whoever fasts Ramadan imanan, out of iman, out of belief, and ihtisaban, right, out of accountability. So this is a very much quoted verse. When Ramadan comes, you hear this a lot, that whoever does this, fasts for these two reasons, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives their sins, right? And another hadith, from one Ramadan to one Ramadan is expiation of sins, minor sins. So what ihtisab here means, out of accountability, is that the person is fasting, right, out of holding themselves accountable in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not because I'm in an environment that tells me to fast. I'm doing it because Allah told me, not because I'm born into a Muslim family, right? And another hadith, "Man qama laylat al-qadri imanan wa ihtisaban ghufira lahu." Right? Whoever stands up in prayer on Laylat al-Qadr, right, the night of power, iman and wahtisaban, the same two conditions here. Out of iman, belief that this is a night which the Prophet ﷺ has chosen or told us about, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen to equate to 100 al-fishar, 1,000 months, right? I do out of iman, belief in what the Prophet ﷺ is telling me, belief in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised, wahtisaban, and out of commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not commitment to my community, not commitment to a custom, not because if I don't go, people are going to say so-and-so wasn't here, right? Then the reward is forgiveness and expiation of sin. He continues, Abu Ismail continues and says, al-i'tisamu billahi huwa at-taraqi an kulli mawhum. He says, al-i'tisam billah, now we're shifting the type of i'tisam to grabbing onto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is to elevate yourself from everything that is, I guess, a falsity or a fallacy, or really mawhum is, it's not real, to put it in the simplest terms. And now he's becoming extra Sufi here. And we talked about the concept of fana early on, right? This concept of transcendence. Now to the Sufis, transcendence is the highest level. This is the highest form of iman, is to transcend. But there are many types of transcendence, right? Ibn Qayyim critiques many of them in this book. I skipped over a lot because I felt like it's not really relevant, but since he's bringing it up here, I think it's important to point it out, because sometimes you do find these thoughts lingering around, especially in certain poetry and in certain Sufi masters or wise individuals, as they're called. And that is, Sufis believe that a level or a form of transcendence is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala transcends reality itself. Meaning nothing is real except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Now, this seems insane. Right? It seems crazy. It seems like a form of insanity. This isn't real. None of you are real. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is real. Right? Now, I mean, it's even confusing to think about. But the idea here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the presence of Allah, becomes so overpowering that it just completely covers everything else. Right? To where everything is unimportant, nothing is real except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's all I see. Now, of course, this is a heterodoxy, according to Ibn Qayyim. This is not what Islam calls to. On the contrary, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran to take care of our family and to deal with business and to deal with this and to deal with that, right? And you don't find any of these concepts taught by the Prophet ﷺ. Now, rather, what the true type of transcendence is. So I remember I mentioned that there's many types of transcendence. Some are incorrect. Sufi transcendence, I mean. Some are correct, some are accurate. Ibn Qayyim says that no, the correct way to interpret what Abu Ismail is saying here, right? Or the correct way to understand this, that is in line with our Sharia, is that we elevate ourselves from our own will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will. Meaning, we only seek to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do. This is the true transcendence. And how do we do that? Again, we learn how to utilize the world around us, to understand the world around us in a way that represents Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom, rather than our own interpretations of what's going on. And when we talked about the mashahid, if you remember a few lectures ago, the mashahid, the observations, there were 12 or 13 observations, right? This is about trying to understand, rewire our mind to view the universe in a way that ascribes Allah's will to it, or that ascribes Allah's will to it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did this for X reason. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't do it for Y reason. Why is this there? Why is that there? It all goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qada and qadar, His decree, His command. So the highest form of transcendence that we can accept in terms of just Sharia is where our desire, our will, becomes in line with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, not what we want. And the hadith is لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يكون هواه تبعا لما جئت به. None of you will fully believe. None of you will reach high levels of iman until their hawa, remember this word? The hawa, a person's will, their desire, right, their wants, falls in line with what with what the Prophet ﷺ has come with. So remember, the very first lecture, it's not about removing our hawa. It's not about removing our desires. It's about changing our desires to where it falls in line with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. Right? And that is through these concepts that we've been learning over the past several weeks. And i'tisam is 3 levels. There are 3 types of i'tisams, according to Abu Ismail al-Harawi. I'tisam al-amma, the general i'tisam, the i'tisam that the average Muslim does. So you remember average, and then the khas, the inner circle, and then the khas al-khawas, khawas al-khas, the inner circle. The Sufis like doing this. And of course we will critique the opinion of Abu Ismail al-Harawi. I'tisam al-amma, the average Muslim's i'tisam is bil-khabar istislaman wa id'anan بتصديق الوعد والوعيد وتعظيم الأمر والنهي وتأسيس المعاملة على اليقين والإنصاف. Right? If you want to attain the average level of i'tisam, that is through a few things. And that is submitting to the khabar, to our text. The text of Islam, meaning Quran and Sunnah. Right? Meaning, when a verse comes along and says, oh, you who believe, do this, or don't do that, right? That is enough for us to say, okay, this is what I need to do. Right? This is what I need to do. And id'anan, out of submission, right? And out of bitasdiq al-wa'd, out of certainty, out of submission, out of certitude as well. So the average Muslim needs to have this level of certitude. That, yeah, I am sure Islam is the truth, right? It's not a convenience, right? It's not a privilege for certain Muslims, whereas other Muslims, you don't need to be too concerned about what religion is the truth. No, everyone needs to be concerned with that. So istislaman wa id'anan bitasdiq al-wa'd wal-wa'id. They attain a level of submission to the text of Islam, Quran and Hadith, and the way to reach this is by believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promises and His threats. Right? This theme comes up a lot, and I'm sure you remember it comes up a lot. This concept of wa'd and wa'id, Allah's promises and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's threats. They're there for a reason. Right? They are there in the Quran for a reason. There's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala threatens people with hellfire. There's a reason why He encourages them, motivates them with paradise. Because we as human beings, we tend to move because of this. We tend to respond to these things because no one wants to be harmed. You know, if someone were to come to you and with a small thorn, right, and say, I'm going to poke your finger, you can say, you know what, I don't need you to poke my finger, right? You wouldn't want it. Right? Do you agree or disagree, right? Even something as simple as a thorn poking you or scratching you, you say, no, what are you doing, right? And that's something very, very light. How about a torment like hellfire? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. So when we do this, right, when we believe in the promises and threats of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it really develops this submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This submission, this concern to the text of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what He has to say and what the Prophet ﷺ says. It's no longer about, does this make sense to me? It's no longer when a verse comes, oh, you know what, this doesn't seem to fall in line with my worldview. What does this mean? And it becomes a philosophical game where you're questioning and you're retorted and then you question again and then you retort and it just goes on and on because the person isn't willing to accept it. Their mind says that, no, this doesn't make sense. The understanding now is, or the perception now is, I need to protect myself from Allah's threats, and I want to be among those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises paradise. Right? When a verse comes to me, my concern is no longer, right, does this make sense to me? My concern is, right, how do I submit to this? Now, this is a very big difference. I'm not saying that we shouldn't learn what the Quran is saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. But some people approach the Quran, right, from a purely rational perspective, where this needs to make sense to me in order for me to accept it and to apply it. If it doesn't make sense, I'm not applying it, even though the Quran might be clear, or the Quran is clear, or the Hadith is clear. No, this doesn't make sense, right? Why would Allah tell us to do this when, it's better to do it? The rational approach. This is very problematic, and you can see how this puts a lot of constraints and stress on a person's relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas a person who's doing ihtisam to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their concern is with staying outside of the fold of the threats, right? Outside of the threats and within the realm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promises. And they know that they do that through submission. The text comes to me, okay, what do I need to do? Allah's telling me to do this, okay, right? Two very different perspectives. And again, let me emphasize, I'm not saying we don't learn what the Quran is saying. We have to learn, because a lot of times we don't fully understand what the Quran is telling us or what the Hadith is telling us. But what I'm saying is that our approach is not to challenge the Quran. Our approach is to submit to the Quran. And that was what the companions did best. The companions differed amongst each other. The companions debated amongst each other. And sometimes they became upset with one another, right? But as soon as a verse comes, or the words of the Prophet ﷺ comes, they all submit to it. All of them. And I'll give you one example. Umar radiallahu anh sent an expedition to, I believe, some area, and they find out that there's a plague in the area. There's some virus spreading, and it's a deadly virus. So before entering the village, they're at the outskirts, they're debating, should we enter or should we not enter? Now, as far as they knew, there was nothing in the Quran, or they didn't know any hadith that spoke to this. So they were debating, should we go in? Some were saying, no, we should go in. We should not be afraid of the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? If we withhold from going in or refrain from going in, that means we are, afraid of Allah's qadr. No, we should go in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He wills that we don't get sick, we're not going to get sick. But if He wills that we're going to get sick, we're going to get sick even if we're standing out here. While other companions said, no, there's this thing called asbab. There's these things called precautions. We need to do this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holds us accountable to this, or for this, right? So they end up deciding not to go in. Umar radiallahu anh takes the decision, says we're not going in. So one of the companions says, "Atafirru min qadarillah." He says, are you running away from the qadar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So Umar radiallahu anh, in his genius response, says, "Nafirru min qadarillah ila qadarillah." We are running away from Allah's qadar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qadar. Meaning, right? How do you know this is Allah's qadar and this is not Allah's qadar? Allah told us to stay away from something that's going to harm us, right? This is what we understand from the Quran. Therefore, when we refrain from going inside of this, we are going to the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is, if you don't enter a place that has viruses, you're not going to get sick from that virus, right? What happens after is the point I want to make. And that is, I believe Abdurrahman bin Auf comes and says, I heard the Prophet ﷺ say, if you come across a village where there's a ta'un, there's a plague spreading or a virus spreading, do not enter it. So when they heard the hadith, they all agreed then. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ said that's it. That's enough for me, right? This is the iman that the companions had. When Quran says something, when the Prophet ﷺ says something, it's sam'an wa ta'a. We hear and we obey. Why? Because we believe that they know better, right? It's not about, let me think about this. Does this make sense, right? And again, this is not discouraging intellectual thought or really contemplating what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying or finding nuanced details. It's not what I'm saying. But sometimes some things are clear, right? If there's a village that has a plague, do not enter it. What logic do you need to add there, right? This is clear. وَتَعْظِيمِ الْأَمْرِ, and glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command. Now this is something I personally have observed throughout the Muslim world where I've been, where this is truly lost. It's very rare to find someone who truly glorifies, exalts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command. Meaning Allah said to do this, I don't have the right to disobey. Right? I don't have the luxury to disobey. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. How can I disobey that? Now, you had this type of mentality with your parents, or maybe most of you did. That is, when your parents say something, well, my parents said so, I really can't go against that. Why not? Because they're my parents, right? This type of glorification of the command comes from the glorification of the one commanding. Because you glorify your parents, you exalted your parents. When they say something, okay, they said it, right? You might feel that, this is very, very burdensome. I wish they didn't tell me to do this, right? But it's still my parents, I have to, I have to listen. I can't disobey my parents. That's a dishonor. Right? When you have a glorification of the one commanding, you will glorify their command. That's the reality. So the Muslims' lack of glorifying and exalting the commands of Allah really goes back to their lack of exaltation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. If we truly had this view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who He is, if we truly believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our Lord supreme, we will believe that His command is supreme as well, above all things. We wouldn't have this problem of my rationale tells me something else and I'm going to make the Quran submit to what I think is the truth, right? Which is all too common now with these mashallah overeducated youth, American Muslim youth. They think they're smart because they went to so-and-so colleges or they have XYZ degrees, right? I mean, if they think they're smarter than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then I think their problem is bigger than, right, whether or not a verse makes sense or not. But the point here is when we glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, then we glorify what He's telling us to do. Allah said so, that's enough for me, because Allah is enough for me. But if Allah isn't enough for me, I'm going to start looking to other resources to try and, sway or change what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling me. Ta'zeem al-amr wal-nahi, right? So Allah's commands and prohibitions, we glorify them because we glorify Allah. وتأسيس المعاملة على اليقين والإنصاف, and we establish our actions, our interactions based on certainty and insaf, which I'll explain right now. It means that على yaqeen means certainty, and that is a person is certain in Islam and they glorify the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as I said, ملتزما لأوامره على سبيل الإذعان لا على سبيل الاحتياط. Right, what they're doing is out of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not out of, just to be safe. Maybe you've heard of this excuse before. Well, yeah, I prayed just to be safe, or I'm going to do this just to be safe. And sometimes it reaches the extent where a person will have three religions just in case, right? Right. One time, I believe a Moroccan guy, he was a sheikh and a priest and a Buddhist as well. And he had all three symbols, wearing all three necklaces. Subhanallah. Why? Just to be safe. How does that work? Right? How are you just being safe? It in of itself contradicts itself. The Quran says these religions are false. You say, okay, just to be safe, I'm going to be a Muslim, but at the same time, I'm going to follow the false religion, which my, to be safe strategy is telling me not to follow. Right? So it's about these levels of Iman, enhancing them to where our commitment to Iman is actually that commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to a just-in-case mentality. Insaf, on the other hand, is insaf is doing the right thing, or it'll be translated as justice. You're just in the way you interact with others. And there are two types of interactions, I'm sorry. One is your interactions with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the other with the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for our interaction with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we give it insaf, we give it justice, or do we do it justice when we give ubudiyya, worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, its due right. Meaning, we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way He should be worshipped. Now, one can say the way He deserves to be worshipped. We can never reach the deserving part. We could only try. Meaning, no one can worship Allah the way He truly deserves to be worshipped. Not even the angels, right? So we do what we should do to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's about worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way He deserves or He should be worshipped. And what I love about the wording of this, you'll find throughout Islamic discourse and the scholars, the way they say, أن يعطى العبودية حقها. It's giving ubudiyya, the worship of Allah, its due right. They use this word right. And I love it because the word rights in our current context is very important, right? But it's very limiting as well. And I believe I mentioned this before. Rights in America is any American is going to glorify this concept called rights, right? You have rights because this country was established on rights, right? So it's your right to do this. It's your right to do that. You have the right to have a job. You have a right not to be discriminated against, right? And it's so powerful in this country that, I mean, it's a legal term as well. But it's limiting in a sense that rights are limited to socio-political realities. That's it. Meaning you have social rights and you have political rights. This is where rights play a role. That's it. In Islam, what the scholars made clear is that Allah has rights as well. The Prophet ﷺ makes this clear. Haqqullah alaykum. This is what he tells Mu'adh bin Jabal. Allah, you know what Allah's right is over you? It's to worship Him and not worship besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not associate partners to Allah. It is His right. Right? The Quran has rights over you, that you respect the Quran. You don't put it in a place that's dirty or that there are impurities lingering around. Right? That when you read the Quran, you read it respectfully. You don't take it as a toy or a joke. These are rights that we are responsible for, that we are held accountable for. So Allah has the right to be worshipped. And we need to fulfill that right by doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to do. And to clarify that a little bit more, it is about being grateful to Allah. So worshiping Allah the way He should be worshipped goes back to certain fundamentals. One of them is to be grateful to Allah over what you have been blessed with. Meaning your blessing, the blessing that you have, you ascribe it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't ascribe it to anyone else. Even if someone helped you obtain that blessing or reach it, or they're the ones who gave you it in the first place, you thank them because that's what the Prophet taught us to do. Right? وَمَنْ لَمْ يَشْكُرِ النَّاسِ لَمْ يَشْكُرِ اللَّهِ. Whoever is not grateful to others, to people, then they won't be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when they look at this blessing, they know that it came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah used that person to bring you this blessing. And there's wisdom in doing that. You know, why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send you the blessing directly? Express mail or DHL, whatever, right? He could have done that, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can send this blessing and put it right in front of your door. But He gives it to you through someone else. There are many wisdoms here. Let's go a sidestep here because I think this is important. One of them is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now, He increases the amount of reward that's coming out of this particular event. So a blessing is coming to you, right? That is a reward of coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to you. Now, bringing it to you through someone, that person is going to get reward because he gave it to you, right? Someone comes, for example, with, what's a good blessing? Let's say a cake, whatever, right? A cake. Your neighbor comes to you with a cake, and it's a Muslim neighbor. Come, hey, we made a cake, and I know the Prophet ﷺ said that if you make food, make extra so that you give it to your neighbor as well. That's back in the day when food was scarce. But, if we continue this tradition, then inshallah, at least that builds that relationship. So now, who's getting the reward? You're getting a reward, and that Allah is giving you this blessing. And that person is also getting a reward. So instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making the reward to one person, now He made it to two people, because Allah is the most generous. Another thing is, by sending you that blessing through someone, it strengthens our relationships, which is important, right? And the Prophet ﷺ made that a goal. Tahabbu. Do what brings you closer together, what bonds your hearts more. Also, it's reminding you that you are not independent. You cannot be independent. You cannot live independently. You always need someone else. And that's a very big reminder. And there are other wisdoms as well, but here are three types. Anyway, going back, our interactions. Our interaction with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that we worship Him the way He deserves to be worshipped, and that is by being grateful to Him for our blessings, and we don't forget Him when someone else is involved in that blessing. And we don't seek help from other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we don't use our blessings in order to do sins. Now, this is a big one. Money is a blessing. It's a big blessing. Khair. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it khair, good. Right? But when someone starts using that good, that blessing, to do sins, to buy what they're not supposed to buy, to go where they're not supposed to go, right? That is very problematic. Allah gave us blessings. Our senses are blessings. Our money is a blessing. Our I was about to say spouse, but I'll skip that. It's not a blessing to everyone, but our children are blessings, right? Our living in America is a blessing, for example. We all have 1,001 blessings, 1,000,001 blessings. The idea is that we use these blessings to get closer to Allah. That's why He gave us it. Why did He give us vision? So that we look at the world around us to help ourselves learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why did He give us ears? So that we listen to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And we use it to sustain ourselves. Why did He give us, a mouth, ability to speak? So that we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the initial reason, right? Now there are permissible things to do, but this is the reason, this is the wisdom why He gave it to us. Now when we use it for that which is contradictory to bring us closer to Allah, that which distances us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's very problematic, right? So worshiping Allah or giving Allah His due right in being worshipped includes not using our blessings to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not to praise others for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided us with. Allah gave you blessings, He gave you provisions, that is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that, not anyone else. Now again, this doesn't mean we don't thank someone for helping us get a job. It's not what it's saying. But the true thanks is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is His right. This is what He deserves. And this is our responsibility to fulfill that. There are 3 hadiths here which I think are beautiful, and we'll conclude with them. In one hadith, it said that إِنِّي وَالْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ فِي نَبَإٍ عَظِيمٍ أَخْلُقُ وَيَعْبُدُ غَيْرِي وَأَرْزُقُ وَيَشْكُرُ سِوَاي. Me, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the jinn and human beings are in a great situation. There's this interesting dynamic here, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates, and these 2 beings, the jinn and ins, the jinn and humans, worship other than Him. Allah is one creating, and humans are worshiping other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one providing, and humans are being grateful to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is an interesting dynamic. It's like someone comes to you with that cake, and then you go to, what are the Betty Crocker, I think the boxes? They call Betty Crocker and say, thank you so much for the cake, right? Well, wait, hold on. Your neighbor's the one who made the cake for you, not Betty Crocker, right? It's strange. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one creating, and He is the one creating all that we see, and we're worshiping other than Him, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one providing, and we're thanking other than Him. When you put in these examples, these analogies, it makes more sense. Like, hey, wait, that doesn't make sense. If Allah is the one providing me, why am I thanking X, Y, Z? Right? It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who I should thank. And another hadith, Ibn Adam, ما أنصفتني خيري إليك نازل وشرك إلي صاعد أتحبب إليك بالنعم وأنا عنك غني وتتبغض إلي بالمعاصي وأنت فقير إلي ولا يزال الملك الكريم يعرج إلي منك بعمل قبيح. This is beautiful. In this hadith, it's a hadith Qudsi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, child of Adam, you have not given me my due right. You have not been just to me. My good is coming down to you, whereas your evil is coming up to me. أتحبب إليك بالنعم. I love this. I give you blessings to help you love me. Allah gives us things to help us love Him. وأنا غني عنك. وأنا عنك غني. And I don't need you. When we try and win someone over, a lot of times, if not every time, there's something we're looking to gain. That's just the reality. That is humanness, right? That when we look at someone else, if there's nothing to gain out of it, we're not really motivated to build a relationship with that person. Or if they are causing us a burden or a strain, I know when this person comes, they're going to stay a long time, and they're going to bother me. I don't want to see that person. This is how we humans act. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying what? I don't need you. And your evil is coming up to me. But despite that, I give you things to help you love me. I don't need you. And that shows the perfection, the compassion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He wants us to love Him even though He doesn't need us. It's about us now. When we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are the one benefiting from that. We are the one flourishing because of that. Allah doesn't need us. And I love this word because it truly teaches us how to look at our blessings. أَتَحَبَّبُ إِلَيْكَ بِالنِّعَمِ. I help you love me by giving you blessings. Not only are we enjoying the blessings, right? We're also enjoying the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we get out of it. Because we as human beings, we love to love. We love to love. From the time we are a young baby, we want to love something, we want to be loved as well. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. أتحبب إليك بالنعم وأنا عنك غني وتتبغض إلي بالمعاصي وأنت فقير إلي. And you continue, right, to do things that makes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislike you. Right? But so we do things, when we do sins, it distances us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and you are in need of me. You are in need of me. And therefore you need to be close to me. But you are doing that which is distancing you from me. Right? It's comparing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us. How Allah deals with us and how we deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are in need of Allah. Yet despite that, we are doing that which distances us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا يَزَالُ الْمَلَكُ الْكَرِيمُ يَعْرُجُ إِلَيَّ مِنْكَ بِعَمَلٍ قَبِيحٍ. And the angels continue to come up to me, ascend to me with your evil actions. That's the end of that hadith. And then the third one, يَا ابْنَ آدَمْ ما من يوم جديد إلا يأتيك من عندي رزق جديد وتأتي عنك الملائكة بعمل قبيح تأكل رزقي وتعصيني وتدعوني فأستجيب لك وتسألني فأعطيك وأنا أدعوك إلى جنتي فتأبى ذلك وما هذا من الإنصاف. In this hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, now the authenticities of these hadith might vary, right? Some of them might not be authentic, but the teachings here are in line with what Islam teaches us. O child of Adam, there is not a new day except that new provisions come to you from me. Meaning with every day we have our provisions. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being consistent in that He's always providing us. And the angels every day come to me with evil actions from you. You eat my provisions, meaning you benefit from my provisions, but you also disobey me. You make dua to me, and I answer your dua. You ask me, and I give you. And I call you to my paradise, but you refuse that. And this is not justice. Okay? Again, the reason why I love these hadith or these sayings is that they bring these terms that are very important to us and sensitive in our context, justice and rights, and they give a theological understanding as well. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has rights, and there is ways that we can be just with Allah and unjust with Allah, and this resonates with us a lot more. Now, to conclude, Abu Ismail al-Harawi said that this is the i'tisaam of the average Muslim, but Ibn Qayyim interjects and says this is the i'tisaam of the best Muslims. This right here, what we went through this past 20 minutes or so, this is the itisaam that we want to reach, where our commitment to Allah is about love of Allah, glorification of Allah, and commitment to Him. Our responsibility to preserve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's right, that we worship Him because it's His right to be worshipped. And we do our best to continue to enhance our worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to where it's about our desires being in line with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger told us to do, not what we want to do. والله تعالى أعلم وصلى الله بنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.